Everybody, my name is Peter Armaly. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at ESG, Customer Success as a Service, and I welcome you to today's webinar. We've got a really good topic, I think, a little bit of an unusual one for our series, considering our series is only about a year and a half old. We are intentionally trying to kind of broaden the conversation of customer success topics into kind of adjacent areas, both like organizational kind of topics, but also technology topics, and many of those things kind of blur. The reason we're doing that is because we want to be very intentional about helping our community understand what's in store, what's already existing, what are the possibilities for you to improve your service, but also what you need to start thinking about going forward. In this topic, dark matter data and AI-driven innovation, the future is here, we think is right up that alley. And we're thrilled to invite Lisa Palmer as our guest speaker. Lisa is an AI expert, but more than that, she's got a long, illustrious career as a data expert and as a leader of a variety of organizations and different companies, really pushing the thought leadership within those companies around how they think about data. So Lisa, welcome. I just want to maybe ask you to say a few words about maybe your recent past and what you're up to right now as AI strategist.
Thank you for having me, Peter. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm actually a tremendous fan of customer success. I've had an interesting career. I started my career as an IT practitioner and all the way up through being a CIO in a financial services organization. Then I worked for Gartner, advising executive clients about how to digitally transform their organizations, leveraging Gartner's research. And that was very much focused on executive clients, which helps to really understand what the directionality is with regard to go-to-market as a holistic approach, which in my mind very directly impacts customer success. And I, most recently, let me flash back a little bit. Really early in my career, like my first real job, I started my undergrads in engineering, Peter, and I started at a network planning organization. Within 2 months, I had built out data structures and reports because I love data, have always been that way, and found myself in IT, and I've been there ever since. So throughout my career, I have plugged back into this love of data over and over again. And when I went through a little bit of a period in my life where I had a really big job, I was traveling a lot, had a lot of responsibility, and I had my mother was ill, and I really wanted to spend some key time with her. And when I asked myself, what would I like to do? I landed on, I love data, and I'd really like to go back to getting closer to data. And that led me to spend time at Teradata and at Splunk, where I've been able to really, get back to those roots of what I enjoyed from the very beginning of my career. And so I also spent time as an enterprise seller, working for Microsoft, running my own territory for Microsoft. And this combination experience for me has really driven home for me how important data is, that it underscores everything. It underscores our ability to well serve our customers and to help them to meet their customers' objectives. How do we empower our end customers to really be successful in their mission? And data is the underlying foundation for all of that.
Yeah, and I think the audience will be very happy to hear you speak that way, because customer success is really trying to bridge the gap between kind of low-level technology and the business kind of imperative that needs to be surfaced for customers and the employer. So I'm just going to break out of this slide and just go into our regular mode of conversation. Okay.
Okay.
And so, I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping items here for the audience. You're free to ask questions, and I encourage you to do so. If you have questions, just put them into the chat, or the Q&A, I should say, and we will keep an eye on that. and I might bring those in during the conversation, or we'll try to save time for the end and address any questions you might have. So once again, welcome you to this webinar. I'm just going to go right into the questions I've got prepared for you, Lisa. And so let's start with your focus of the last 10 years. You touched on some of these things when you mentioned Gartner and Splunk, but you also, you were at Microsoft too, I think prior to that. What are a few observations you could maybe share with us about how companies typically approach understanding their customers through data, and also how well managed and organized and leveraged is the data that they do collect? What are your thoughts on that?
Interestingly enough, data it absolutely is the thing that powers our ability to successfully serve customers from a 360-degree perspective. And ironically, it is largely siloed and very difficult to access in a way that allows us to really do that from a 360-degree perspective. So I'm going to give you a current example. So, Peter, that I'm right in the middle of finalizing my doctoral study, and I've studied 46 specific cases, specific current cases that are happening within the last 2 years of how data and AI have been used by enterprises. And one of them that just really jumps out at me about this is an example from Zurich Insurance. So they have certain seasons of the year that they get this super high volume of customer emails. And it was so bad that they were really concerned about the delay that customers were experiencing in the time to respond to them, as well as their employee experience was heavily impacted by this because people were having to work these outrageous number of hours to keep their customer experience in some kind of reasonable realm. So they decided that what they were going to do in this effort is to use their existing customer data and use natural language processing, artificial intelligence, to handle this massive influx. And they were using the NLP to categorize and prioritize so that the ones that really needed to be dealt with immediately pop to the top for the people to get involved to really help to address. And then they had ones that the NLP could 100% handle, and that volume would come off of the top. So this to me was a spot on example of a real case where an organization is using their data, their customer data, and NLP from an AI perspective to well serve their customers and to give their employees the relief that they need.
Yeah, that sounds like an ideal scenario. I suspect most companies struggle to achieve that sort of capability. And I think about, we talk about data, but that's it's a critical component of modern business, of course, but on its own, pretty useless, right? So, and we talk about that data is just a kind of a raw material, and when it's analyzed and placed within the context, proper context, it comes to life, and for the curious. So that's when work can become exciting in my mind. So does that word exciting capture how you feel about data or you felt about data over the last decade? And if so, what do you think are some of the reasons that a person's excitement about data can be easily deflated in the modern business world?
So yes, bottom line, I'm very excited about data. I think that it really truly is the fuel that powers the engine of business. I believe that to be the case. And now with the proliferation of AI capabilities just growing leaps and bounds, that all, AI has to have that data for fuel. And so to me, we are at a point where we're going to supercharge the power of data through what's possible with artificial intelligence. So, but to get to your question about any concern or frustration that people might have around the data space, it makes me think about what's missing. What's missing in the data really resonates with me as an issue. So there's this fantastic book out from Carolyn Criado Perez. She wrote this book called Women, Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. And it's her PhD study in book form, but she gives all of these examples about how when data isn't holistic, when it's really not fully representative, how it can create harm. And so one example she gives is that safety equipment in manufacturing companies is designed for male bodies. And so there is a higher number of safety incidents for females because of things like the gloves that they wear are physically too big for them and will get stuck in, they will get pulled into equipment because their gloves are too big. Or protective gear that's built for men's bodies and allows for women to actually end up not being protected because it gaps on them, and they're open for, bullets can get through for them because their vests are gapping open. So these are the kinds of things that I think can be frustrating, is that we don't have all of the data. The data is sometimes missing, which is so crazy because there's this huge amount of data being captured and so much of it's not being used.
Yeah, I think that's probably true if we bring it down to the level of customer success. We talk all the time about customer data and how it's so critical to understand your customer. The cliche is a 360-degree view of your customer. But I think that's a really good commentary you just had around missing data. And sometimes I guess most of the time it's probably unintentional. You don't know what you're missing. Yep. But in the example you gave, which is pretty great, is that in the case of women, if it's not being collected about women, then decisions are made that are, erroneous, or in some cases dangerous for people. And I think, for customer success, keep that in mind. We always say it's good to start small and a kind of a pilot phase and move things out, but I think you need to continually kind of ask questions about the data and the insights that are being produced. Is this good enough? Is there more to this story that I'm not paying attention to? So I think that's, for me, probably the big takeaway from your answer is that you always have to be curious. You can't kind of rest on this, right? So.
That's exactly the word that came to mind for me, Peter, is stay curious.
Yeah. So let's kind of pivot a little bit right to AI. My opinion is that the rapid rise of AI is a natural progression in human history and in the human capacity for innovation. Even if you look back at human history in the last 50 or 60 years, it's quite remarkable how quickly humans have innovated. AI's development shouldn't really come as a surprise to us, given the exponential growth in higher educational institutions across the world. They act as incubators, but not, exclusively. Companies also incubate ideas, of course, but also as pathways for trained individuals that graduate and move into the business world, where they find opportunities to make an impact through new technology and technological process creation. There are plenty of examples of exploitation of AI for bad, but there's equal numbers of examples of AI for good. So, we won't tackle that today. That's a whole separate topic. What we want to talk about is whether businesses are prepared for this rapid rise of AI. And if not, is it primarily because they have not been able to adequately get their arms around the long simmering challenges they have with data? In a recent article for Wharton, Scott Snyder, who's a senior fellow at Wharton's Mack Institute in Innovation Management, and he's the chief digital officer for Eversana. He said this: despite the fact that 80% of all data will be controlled by enterprises by 2025, 40 to 90% of this data goes unused or is dark. So my question to you, Lisa, is if the success of AI depends on not just data collection, which most companies have been doing forever, but also on data governance and data hygiene, what would you recommend that business leaders do first before exploring AI-based solutions?
Yep. So that's a fantastic quote from Mr. Snyder. And I suspect that the amount of dark data, given that range that he offered, is probably closer to 90%, particularly given the rise of sensor-related data. We have so much more now. So based on my recent doctoral study that I mentioned earlier, I've got these 46 real world cases. And the clear thing that emerged in this is that focus on a very specific situation, a business problem, an opportunity, a revenue opportunity, a process, very specific focus is what led to success for these organizations. So this allows for laser focus on data, people, process, and tech, specific to that problem, right? So that we can focus on creating an outcome that we're desiring. And this is really where my heart is right now with the work that I'm doing. I'm seeing that we've got to just keep focusing on what is the outcome we want to create. What is the customer experience you want to create? What is the revenue growth opportunity you want to create? Whatever that is, really focus on that. And if we kind of harken back to that Zurich Insurance email scenario that I described, in that case, they were designing this solution for a very specific situation. But what ended up happening is that they were wildly successful with a specific situation they set up to address. And they also found out afterwards that they were able to scale out much of what they had built, even though they hadn't built with scale in mind, because they had put some of the great foundation in place. They were able to leverage what they learned and able to scale that out. And I have seen that focus on these practical situations and the benefit of that, creating momentum in organizations. I've seen that play out repeatedly.
So it sounds like a really good piece of advice. It's like a best practice, I would think, to really focus on kind of the various kind of dimensions of a problem or a challenge. And one of those things is the people challenge. Yeah. And that's true pretty much of all business challenges, isn't it? We're always talking about transformation, and the thorniest problem of all is how do you get everyone kind of on the same page and the same mindset to really accelerate in the direction of the goals you need to achieve. And so, I think this is absolutely vital in customer success, to figure out how are you going to tackle a project. And if we think about AI, I'm of the opinion that kind of the best results come about when you have people at the front lines who actually believe in things. Top-down imposed solutions rarely, in my opinion, work in the long run because you're not getting kind of the buy-in that you absolutely need. So I'm challenging the customer success leaders, if you're thinking about exploring AI and kind of better kind of data strategies, you need to involve the people who work in your organizations to get their kind of opinions and buy-in and educate them at the same time, rather than waiting for the chief technology officer to come and impose sort of a strategy that you just must adopt. I don't think I think it's probably better strategy to figure out how you can kind of bubble up the right kind of momentum. Kind of your thoughts on that particular idea?
I completely concur, Peter. I've seen over and over again my experience, across thousands of Gartner clients, my research, my own experience. I've seen that these two things, culture, you mentioned, culture is huge. So, but very pragmatically speaking, get the people involved who are passionate, who are believers, right, who are vested in this idea that there is power in data and that there is possibility to change the way that things are to better perform against your desired outcomes. So I absolutely agree, Peter.
Yeah, and I would love to read a study if there was such a thing, or I'm kind of challenging HBR and MIT and everybody to really look at what is successful kind of, what are the success examples or, variables that go into, the project that we're talking about, where AI is adopted, is one of the success variables that you have champions who work with the kind of the pilot project and then kind of amplify it out. Is that kind of the skill that's absolutely vital and necessary for longer term, kind of broader company impact? I'm just kind of wondering about that.
So my research has shown that having a knowledgeable vested champion. So what that means is that in situations where success has been repeatedly identified, there was somebody internal, and the internal piece was very important. It was an internal champion who is invested in the success of their efforts, and someone who is credible and respected in the organization, not only from a perspective of just being someone that is considered to be loyal to their organization, interested in their success, et cetera, but someone that actually knows their processes and knows their people and has that kind of credibility. So yes, my research has shown that champion and selecting individuals to work in concert with that champion who are also excited about the potential, that those are two key elements to leading to a successful project.
Okay, good to hear. So when I was thinking about this topic, there's two main drivers behind my desire to invite you as a guest on this webinar. And in my view, many customer success organizations are really perched on a fulcrum. So if this is kind of controversial, I think, but I've been voicing it in the community quite a bit, which is that if they continue to execute their existing models of engagement that rely mostly on people as the face of communication with customers, these organizations are going to begin to fail, and they'll eventually fall off in the wrong direction. And I say that simply because I don't believe that scales. And also it's inconsistent across broad teams, and the customer community feels kind of like this disjointed and inconsistent experience. And so I feel like that's probably what's going to happen with these organizations that are still relying almost completely on human, face-to-face kind of conversations with customers. So many of us believe that the path to a more viable future for customer success lies in its willingness to go in the other direction, towards an embrace of digital as the leading face of information for customers, and adopting more technologies, modern technologies, to deliver more personalized and impactful service. So that's one driver. I was thinking about you and in that, so I thought about you. Second driver was the other is that you have such a rich background in data analytics and data management. You're such an advanced business thinker about the ethical use of artificial intelligence. And I believe customer success professionals will need to grow those skills in that direction. And so my question to you is, if customer success, makes a move towards more fully embracing deeper data analytics to create actionable insights, and perhaps even AI, what are a few considerations CS leaders should be aware of? What are the perils in the way you think about things? Can't hear you, Lisa.
I think from a customer success lens, it's really important for us to think about embracing data and AI. Frankly, I believe that not doing so is going to create, to your point, Peter, is creating customer retention risk and is creating a negative impact around your potential for revenue growth. I actually see customer success people as being tremendous levers, powerful individuals in the potential to grow revenue. So, but the only way that we can do that is if we have things like heavy personalization that's done for CS, because you don't have the time. I mean, we know that just bandwidth wise, customer success folks do not have the time to do all of the external research that they need to do to create a truly personalized experience for each individual client that they work with. So what if we could use things like data and artificial intelligence to create recommendation engines that would, pop up information that would recommend for a phone call you're taking or a Zoom call that you're leading, that would recommend what conversation path to take with that client. There's real power in the ability to bring the things that are top of mind for that customer, top of mind for your CS individual at the moment that they're interacting. That, at that point where they're really spending that time together is when it's critical. And so I think of the opportunity not only for what exists today, but also what if you were to add external data into that recommendation engine as well. So what if you had an engine that was grabbing information about what was happening in their local geography or what was happening in their competitive space? A competitor just made an announcement and you know that they have technology that they've already purchased from you and they aren't using. So if you had a recommendation engine that would pop up the fact that a competitor just did something, and you know that if they would just deploy what they already own, they would be able to, get back on parity, on equal ground with that competitor. That's the kind of thing that would give you a talk track, a deep business value talk track to drive things like adoption, which is so important from a CS lens.
Right. So there's a couple of questions from the audience. I think it would be wise to bring them in at this particular point because they're relevant for what you're just saying. First is I'll go to Oliver Plain first. So where do you see AI playing an important role in customer success platforms? And I think what Oliver's saying is, just for your information, if you're not aware, Lisa, there's a category of technology out there, and we call them customer success platforms. There's a variety of vendors, and it's not as crowded as the marketing automation technology stack that Scott Brinker and others kind of refer to a lot, but it's getting busy. There's a lot of small vendors, large vendors, and so do you see AI? I don't expect you to have intimate knowledge of the tools there, but do you see AI playing an important role there in the platforms?
I absolutely see an important role there. I think that these, being able to elevate the level of information that you have as CS professionals at the moment that you're interacting with people, there's just no way that doesn't create value. And artificial intelligence has the ability to help us to scale, to look at data at scale in ways that we're not able to do from a human perspective. And so I think that there is so much data that impacts what happens with customer success that it's absolutely an area that is, that is ripe for AI to make a significant impact.
Yeah, I agree. And I would go even further and say that if those companies are not thinking about AI, I'm sure they are, but if they're not, I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble in the near future. So the second question comes from Nicholas Rodriguez, and I knew this was going to come up, GPT. So if anyone who's not familiar, it's the hottest thing out there at the moment. It's kind of maybe Lisa, you probably are aware of it. Really quickly, it's just AI, very approachable AI. You just kind of position like an idea for it or a suggestion, and it will turn around in human language, really relatable human language, provide a more fulsome answer. And so he wants to know, what are your thoughts on ChatGPT and how CS could utilize the technology? I have thoughts on that as well. But am I aware of teams already implementing this technology in CS playbook motions? I am not, but Lisa, I'm curious what your thoughts are around ChatGPT and maybe people should start experimenting with it.
Should people start experimenting with it? Absolutely. This is a fun tool. It helps people to understand what the power, what the capability, possibilities are of this kind of AI that's, obviously alive and well. That's why you should try it out. I encourage people to try out any of these large language model informed tools so that you really start to understand and can visualize and experience firsthand what is possible. I think that if you go and play with this, or you play with something like Dolly Tool to do, to create generative AI art, or, you go out and play with something, if you're somebody that likes code, to go out and play with a code generator. There are all kinds of artificial intelligence tools for free online to help you to craft emails, to help you to craft quick paragraphs. There are all kinds of these tools that are available to you that you could already be using, whether or not your employer is heavily embracing them or not, to better serve your customers. So should you try it, absolutely encourage you to do so. And these are the kinds of things that we have the opportunity to help to evolve your organization, help to evolve the way you're thinking about solving problems and addressing processes that you have through some of these tools that are in the wild. So with regard specifically to this particular language model response, it's fun to play with. You'll probably be shocked at some of what it will tell you when you try it out. It's obviously got all of the markers of the challenge that comes with AI that learns based on data that it gathers from the wild. So there are things that, there are challenges with it around, discrimination and different kinds of bias and things that happen because humans are biased. And the main data source that's feeding it are, interactions with humans and information that's coming from humans. So take that with a grain of salt. I certainly wouldn't use it without heavy edits, but it's also just a really powerful way to learn and experience firsthand what's possible.
Yeah, I just read an article. I think, if I get this right, Nicholas Thompson, who writes for the New York Times, and he's thrilled with this thing. He says it's going to save his life in terms of the amount of work he has to put in to write an article. He described all the kind of background stuff he does to put together an article, all this kind of minutia of searching, arcane kind of like facts and opinions and stuff and bringing them all together. He says Chat GPT has already tried it, can bring a lot of that together. Sure, he has to then kind of vet it, as you just said, Lisa, heavy editing, but it saves him like an immense amount of time. And I just think this is like, we're early days with this stuff. And I like that it's very approachable. I've already played around with it a little bit and I was pretty impressed. So one more on this. I just want to don't move away too much because Madeline Evans brought in a question around the recommendation engines that you mentioned. She thinks they're brilliant. Have you seen successful ways or tools that can do this recommendation engine effectively outside of the product itself? She says it's obviously not ideal, but what's possible?
So have I seen these? I have to be honest, I haven't done a search of the market, particularly in the CS space. And, certainly we could talk about that later, Peter, but as far as, is it possible? It absolutely is possible. So imagine the same types of recommendation engines that are used to identify what you will likely buy on Amazon, for example. That same kind of technology from a recommendation engine perspective can be leveraged with a CS framework in mind. So a lot of these technologies that have started in retail are proliferating into other parts of businesses and are becoming part of operations and not just high-end lofty goals, but really becoming embedded in daily enterprise B2B operations.
Okay. So one more before I go back to my questions, but from Sandy Hugh in the audience, what recommendations do you have for companies, and she means SMBs, that don't have access to data scientists? How can they leverage the data they have with an AI approach?
Oh, I love this. I love this question. Love the perspective coming there. So not everyone's going to have data scientists. That's just the reality. There are a lot of different situations available today. So there's a concept, data science as a service. You can actually buy many of, you can gain access to data prep, to data engineering, to data science work, to data analytics work. You can gain access to all of those things in a subscription manner which is fairly new, but it's really gaining ground. And we're seeing a lot of organizations in the SMB space look for this kind of data science as a service approach. So I think that there are opportunities out there. There are also a lot of these freebie tools, depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. If it's, from, making emails at scale, videos at scale, doing things, writing, pulling together information like what Peter just described. I mean, there's just tremendous tools available at zero cost today that you could use.
Amazing. Just like, in a sense, developers, their jobs have changed significantly with no code tools and that sort of thing. I imagine with AI, it'll become a lot more democratic in terms of the availability for people more broadly to be able to use it.
Peter, there's a whole group of people. There is a movement around AI, democratizing AI, and that will be approached, or it's being approached right now in this with this mindset of creating AI as a service. And obviously, that's a little bit more complicated than it sounds. And yet it's very doable as well. So I'm encouraged that there is a movement in this space to democratize access to data science and to artificial intelligence. Yeah,
I see that as a real positive thing too. So I recently attended a lecture. It was a book launch and a lecture. The three authors of a book called Power and Prediction. They spoke about artificial intelligence in the context of business. And one of the things they said was, the rise of AI is shifting prediction from humans to machines. This sets the stage for a flourishing of new decisions that will have profound implications for system-level innovation. So I don't know, Lisa, about whether you're a natural optimist. I am. And when I read the quote, and when I read the quote, I'm excited at the possibility it communicates to me. So a question for you, do you see a day in the near future when AI will penetrate organizations to the extent that the authors hint at? Or do you see AI being able to work its way into low-level processes that teams like customer success utilize to deliver their service to customers?
So I too am an optimist, Peter. I love to look for what's possible. What could we be doing? What should we be doing? So without a doubt, I'm optimistic. In my research study, I identified 3 ways that AI is already creating tangible business value in SMB and enterprise environments. So 3 pieces: internal operations, creative new ways to drive revenue, and risk avoidance. So all of these scenarios could apply to customer success. So think about applying AI to processes like Zurich Insurance did. Think about one of those problems that you really need to address as a team, as a CS team, and how could you do that? Secondly is this category of creating new ways to drive revenue. So when, from a CS lens, you have the opportunity to identify cross-selling opportunities, you're interacting with customers in the trenches with them. You know better than anyone else does what their actual real problems are on a daily basis. So what if you were able to help your sales team to identify other places where you could expand into? So that is something that could be enabled through data and artificial intelligence. And then finally, this third category that I've seen is identifying risk avoidance idea. And so from a CS lens, what about identifying at-risk renewals? So as an example, in one of my case studies, they were able to successfully predict which customers would renew and even which ones would pay on time. So as a result of that, they were able to create a tiger team to go and deal with those customers that were really heavily at risk. And they were able to create this categorization and prioritization of their human time, their human efforts based on the risk that they identified. So this is a perfect example of how it could be applied to CS.
Do you know if in that case, they had to overcome some internal cross-organizational challenges for data access and that sort of thing, or what?
In this particular example, yes, it was a fairly It was a fairly lengthy project where they had to do a lot of kind of mental onboarding to this idea of what it was they were trying to accomplish. And there is a consistent thread of that you have to find the people that are champions, find the people that are excited about it, and then onboard those in your organization so that you can break down data silos and get access to the information that's really critical. I would say, Peter, in these situations, less is more from a data perspective. Now, we can't not look at the data that's missing, because there may be critical pieces that are missing that we need to go create or go find some kind of substitute for that. But in these cases that I've seen be just repeatedly successful, they've stayed very tightly focused on what it is they were trying to achieve. And they kept the data focus right specifically to what was needed for that effort.
I think that's a smart strategy. It's probably a better odds on a successful outcome. What are your thoughts on the executive team, the most senior level executives? There's a need for them to be better educated around a modern technology like AI.
Awareness, education at the leadership level is critical, because culture and resource allocation play a tremendous role in your ability to get value from both your data and artificial intelligence. And so is it possible for you, from a grassroots perspective, is it possible for you to be successful in finding, and getting one of these solutions to a specific problem in place? I would say it's possible. It's going to be tough if you can't get it resourced, right? You've got to have the resources to do it. So we do need our leaders to up-level themselves with regard to their comfort around data and artificial intelligence. We need an understanding that this is not a typical IT project. And this is a thread that I see over and over and over. That AI particularly is not an IT project. This is a project where you have to understand that there is going to be it's going to be a bit of R&D. You're going to be learning as you go along, and you've got to be willing to iterate and move with what you learn as you go through the process. And so if you have in mind a typical kind of old school waterfall IT project, that isn't what this is going to be. So it's important that our leaders embrace this different way of thinking in a really agile, iterative manner to get comfortable with what's possible with these AI projects.
Yeah, I think the easiest way for them to do it is to start using a tool like ChatGPT. Lisa, you and I met a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, really through this common kind of focus on thought leadership. And your work and the work I was doing, the work I do now, a lot of it is just like asking questions in the market, asking specific questions of the market, but also researching ideas in the market. And I can see a huge advantage for me to accelerate the work I do by using some sort of an AI tools that kind of collect information for me. Of course, as you mentioned, there would always be that need to question the results themselves, but I think there still is that potential for me of accelerating the amount of work that I aspire to do. So, I have another question for you, and it's it came about because of your LinkedIn bio. One of the things you say about yourself there is leading with customer success is my true north. I'm passionate about the ethical application of technology, particularly data and AI. I believe that purpose and profits can and should coexist. So I love that sentiment and feel that you've captured in a very short sentence two concepts that many customer success professionals find extremely challenging to hold in their heads at the same time. And that's not a diss on CS professionals. I think it's because of the nature of the role we have. There's always this conflict between business and what's right for the customer. So can you elaborate on that a bit more for the audience? If purpose, which is driving great customer outcomes, is possible at the same time a company can be profitable, what are some of the behaviors required of leaders? How do they ensure their teams strike the necessary balance?
Well, the reason that I point out, Peter, that it's purpose plus profit is because there are so many people that believe that you can't pursue purpose and have profit. I absolutely see this playing out over and over again. So let me give you a little perspective. So many years ago, in the B2C environment, there began this push for ethical and sustainable behaviors from brands. And today we're seeing those expectations have bled into the B2B world. And now we're seeing buyers who are willing to spend more money with trustworthy brands, as much as 10% more money they're willing to spend because you're a trustworthy brand. And another element is that statistically, women are concerned more with these kind of ethical and sustainable behaviors. It's statistics. And they comprise 53% of today's B2B buyers under the age of 30. And nearly all buyers under the age of 25 are women. So this means that procurement teams are going to be heavily female in as little as 10 years. Mm-hmm. So all of this tells us that making customer desires for positive world impact for purpose, making that a priority equates directly to revenue. So we're no longer living in a world where committing to ethical and sustainable practices is expensive and altruistic for companies. Instead, now we're in a time where failing to meet customers' ethical and sustainability expectations is going to negatively impact revenue, period. So this isn't a question anymore about can we have both purpose and profit. It is a matter of we must have purpose to have profit. So that has really shifted, which I'm super excited about myself. So to your question about what can leaders do, if you're one of these people that is still getting heavy profit only pressure, data is your friend, as it usually is, right? We love data. So ask yourself, does your company have a stated external position on purpose? A lot of organizations already have one because it is revenue impacting. So if that external purpose statement exists, then you need to learn about it and you need to befriend those internal champions. Who's working on that? And even if you're like, oh, those people in marketing or they're in business development or they're wherever, it doesn't matter. Cross those boundaries. I mean, the power here is in cross-functional teaming. And then next, think about researching your market and your customers, or find the internal team who already has this information. Understand your customers' expectations for your behavior around purpose. Compile that information and present it so that, to your prior point, Peter, about executive and leadership awareness, part of what we can do to help them is to let's get this information in front of them, make sure that our leaders are aware of what customers are demanding from us. And as CS pros, you're talking to them, you're up close with them, you know what they want. You may be surprised to find out in your research that your own procurement team has similar required expectations for the people that they do business with. So you may not know about it because you're not living in it or up close to it every day, but it may already exist in your organization if you just do a little bit of searching and go find that. So, with customer success so close to the customer every day, you need to be holding the banner high around this purpose topic, because bottom line, no organization wants to be fielding a public relations disaster due to unethical or unsustainable behaviors in today's environment.
Do you see that? I 100% agree with you, being a customer success professional, but I also have a background in marketing organizations too. Do you see any sort of like friction there? Because marketing's always considered themselves, and they've been anointed really to be the protectors of brand. I see this, the way you described it, as a little bit of kind of not encroaching, that's not the right word. I think you're doing the right thing as a customer success professional to really focus on purpose. But I think it feels to me like marketing might perk up their eyes at this.
Well, I would think that this would be a perfect opportunity to support your marketing team. They do have responsibility for brand, and that is a very serious concern for them. And I can assure you that they don't want that PR problem. They don't want that to happen. So it's all about your attitude and the way you approach them. I mean, if you go to the marketing team and say, look, we're very interested. We're finding from our customers that they're very interested in what's going on from an ethical and sustainable perspective. And we want to support the company's brand in this space. Can we partner together on something? And, really go into it with a collaborative mindset and a willingness to partner with and support your marketing team. They will love to have that kind of front-facing field input. I mean, I don't know about you, Peter, but I was a chief marketing officer for a period of time, and I teach marketing in an MBA program. And from my perspective, having that consistent lens into the field, that really tight focus and contact with customers, marketing can't really get that. They need that kind of input, but it's all about your attitude and approaching them with a partnership mentality.
Yeah, I agree. I want to just go back, probably our last question, going back to something you mentioned earlier about the percentage of procurement professionals in the within the next 10 years being predominantly or majority female. I see that as one kind of positive or optimistic kind of data point for me about the future. I go back to what I said, I'm a kind of an eternal optimist. And I believe, despite what's going on around us in the world, we don't have to talk about that, but I feel like the younger generations are well positioned with regards to technology to really drive change in a better way. We talk about purpose, we talk about ethical kind of application. But the one factor that they have a huge edge on our generation, my generation, and maybe the ones that are just after me, is their comfort level with this stuff, right? And I've got young people in my life, and they say sometimes they get tired of it and all that stuff, but their ability to kind of just embrace it almost intuitively is really fascinating for me. Do you have thoughts on this subject?
I agree. I'm bullish about the future and what's possible with the way that cross-generationally people are opening their minds to the possibilities of what's happening with artificial intelligence, all fueled by data. I think that there's some fantastic leadership coming out of our younger generations. I love to have people. I have on my personal board of directors, if you're familiar with that, I make sure that I always have a lot of youthful perspective included in my personal board so that I stay in touch with the way that they think about problem solving. So yes, I think there's just tremendous potential for things to be done in a different way. I want to make sure that from a leadership perspective, we're doing two things. One, let's not squash the enthusiasm. Let's embrace it.
Right.
Let's make sure that we aren't the ones that are naysaying what's possible, because we are coloring that through our own experiential lens, because today's realities are different than how than how things were when we were gaining experience at their ages. So don't naysay. Let's make sure that we are not squashing that, but feeding that enthusiasm. And let's make sure that across our entire workforce, we are up-leveling people. We are investing in constant education and the pivot to move people forward, because what's happening with jobs today is that individual tasks are becoming automated. So it's not a matter of people just waking up and their job is gone. It's more that over a period of time, we're automating individual tasks. So jobs are morphing. They're becoming something different. And that means that as individuals and as employers, we have a responsibility to commit to lifelong learning,
Yeah.
so that we can continue this journey together.
Yeah. And I think if a person wants to be seen as very valuable to their employer and the organization, I think they should examine their jobs all the time and offer up ideas on how it could be made more efficient, and not be afraid that by raising it, it's going to somehow put your job at jeopardy. In fact, a good leader will look at this person and say, wow, okay, this is an idea generation engine that we need to kind of hold closer together with us to, involve them in maybe more broader thinking around strategy. So I just recommend to everybody, individual contributors and leaders too, that always be looking at your job, trying to figure out how it can be made better, how you can be delivering better service to your teams, better service to your customers. And a lot of it can be made easier through modern application of things like AI. Lisa, I want to really thank you for joining me on this webinar. I knew this would be a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. Do you want to say any more final words about your doctorate? I really want to congratulate you on nearing the end of that.
Thank you. I'm tired. I need some sleep. Thank you for having me, Peter. I really believe that there is so much potential for customer success to embrace data and artificial intelligence. And I will say this: if we come back together at this time next year and you're still doing your job in the same way you do it today, then you are missing an opportunity, and you are potentially putting your customer retention at risk, and you are potentially putting your own career at risk.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to end it. Thank you. Everybody, thanks for joining us. You will get the recording of this in the next day or so. And finally, I just want to wish everyone a happy and safe holiday season. Please join us again in January. Date's not set yet, but we have another great speaker lined up. So until then, thank you and goodbye.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.